What's going on? It's your boy JL. I was just sitting back processing, of course, and then thoughts just kind of flow through my mind. So I decided to do another thought documentation. This kind like, all right. When I was in Louisville, Kentucky, doing my research while I was out there, right? Well, while I'm at that library or whatever, and I was researching, preparing for my areas in his view of Jesus vlog. So I'm reading about the Babylonians, then the Achaemenids, all these different societies, and then further about certain Arabian societies, the Saba people, the people of or the Saba kingdom rather, or whatever. But anyway, as far as like the period of 480 BC, I kind of like incidentally came across the population number in totality during that time, and you can still Google it. It's about like it was estimated to be about 112 million people. And it instantly fascinated me, and it just brought so many different ideas, and like it put a lot of my thoughts in perspective immediately when I found out about the number. I thought about like all kind of societies, not just then, but going as far back, the most oldest and traceable ones, like the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Hittites, the various different kingdoms throughout the Levant, the Babylonians, of course, later on, the Persians, but keeping it like really, really old, like the early contemporaries, so to speak, to the Egyptians, the people that inhabited Dar to Cheech and Mauritania and southern Mauritania or whatnot, Dar to Cheech, Dar Nima, Dar Tagant, and Dar Walada, right? Four main different sites. And the earliest one out of all four of them is Dar Cheech, which goes back to 4500 BC, right? The rest of them, like thousands of years later, etc. Certain sites is inhabited, abandoned, etc. Those are the four main ones. But the oldest, let me see, the latest abandonment of the site is about 500 BC or something like that. And it's all kind of things that like it was basically a stone settlement. Stone settlement is evidence of uh, cultivation, farming, storehouses for like wheat, things like that. Uh, Organization, certain structures later on, like during like the much later Ghanaian societies, like it was like similarities in architecture. Like you could go online, you could look at certain pictures, you see like castle-like structures as well, right? So when you think about like, okay, 480 BC, 112 million people, immediately in my mind, as I, think about stuff like this, I consider like, because I'm a truther. So I try to get to the most core, hardcore purity of what fucking things, both tangible and fucking non-tangible, in reality consist of. So this wouldn't be far from the point. So immediately in my mind, I just start thinking like genetically, racially, all kind of different shits. And I'm like, all right, of course, like there's, like, for example, they basically were more advanced early on than the Egyptians. Like as far as these stone structures, going back to Egypt, like one of the earliest ones is, aside from the pyramid, the step pyramid in Saqqara or whatnot, which was built in the 27th century BC. I'm thinking about Pharaoh Khufu a year later. He was the pharaoh from like what was it, 2558 BC to 2532 BC, right? That's when they had like structures built, or megalithic structures, or pretty much a good like megalithic structures of him constructed. I forget the total number. It's about anywhere between 20 and 40 of them. It was a decent amount of structures built to this guy, right? Now, that's only during the third millennium BC, the mid millennium, third millennium BC. As far as the site, Tarchit, etc., they had structures, stone structures, much earlier than that period. That's why I say like they were ahead of the Egyptians, as well as their organizations going back there early on as well. And of course, you got to consider like the incremental uh shit from fucking altruism to incremental society or collective steps leading up to that point, even going earlier on than like the fucking third and later, the not the third, but like the fourth and later fifth millennium BC. You know what I'm saying? You got to think about those incremental steps. So when you compare them and then the later Egyptians and then kind of like around the same period as Sumerians and earlier on, because it's a lot of other societies, like for example, in Turkey, there's a society that is much earlier than the Hittites, about like fucking what, around the seventh millennium BC. You know what I'm saying? Around that time, which is dated around 7,000 BC, actually. You know what I'm saying? But not to go too far. But I'm just saying, like the main ones after that, such as the Sumerians, the Egyptians, etc. All of these various, all around, even like in Arabia. You know what I mean? The Saba Kingdom, uh, Lebanon, all throughout the entire planet, all the different cultures in Europe, the Vinca cultures and the Varna cultures, which goes back to the sixth and fifth millennium BCs. They had a lot of organizations there earlier, writing symbols such as the pyramid, for example. But I'm not gonna go too far on that. I keep that in my mind for a much later blog. I already got the documented, but I don't want to expound on that. But just as far as them, they got some of the earlier symbols that's dated to that time as well, which predates the triangular symbol in Sumerian writings later on. Then you got the Kurgans, you got which are they're known for their mounds in central Asia near the Caucasus Mountains, the central steppes, like between the Black and Caspian Sea or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But then you got even earlier, like for example, the wheel, right? Keep in mind the total populations of the planet during all these periods. I'm just comparing all this, but I want to use Darth Chich as a main example still. But so just keep in mind the population of the planet during these periods that I'm mentioning. The total population around the whole entire planet, and then consider like these prevalent civilizations that I'm highlighting. You know what I mean? For the point that I'm making. But like the wheel, for example, I don't. The debate is already solved in my head. I found out how early the wheel is. The Sumerians were not the first people to make the wheel, only because there are traces of the wheel throughout Central Europe that goes back beyond the fucking fourth millennium BC. That goes back as early as the sixth and fifth millennium BC, specifically in Europe. So is traces of hemp, such as weed or whatnot. But the wheel is definitely a fucking fact. I learned about that when I was in Detroit going through their books in the reference sections. And I found so many fucking interesting facts. You know what I'm saying? But I don't want to go too much of a tangent. So anyway, like that, for example. That's not too far from the society of Darth Chachit as well. Same thing in Varna and the Vinca cultures. One of them has the earliest traces of gold. They actually fashioned gold. There's early traces there in their society as well. But I feel like that can be disputed because based on my own research, there's also traces around that same period in Nubia, for example. I'm talking about much, much earlier Nubia. I'm talking about like deeper down in Sudan. Same thing with arrows and bows. But these are facts more so for a future blog. There are arrows and bows that are traced as far as around 8,000 BC. A little after and a little bit before that, due to like burial remains of different bodies and how people died, and things like that. So, like in Zambia, for example, the earliest arrow and bow goes back, let's see here, I think 10,000 BC. Yeah, about around 10,000 BC. But anyway, I'm talking about all this like unknown and lost history. You know what I'm saying? That's interesting. So think about all these things that goes on, right? Now, take them shits. Oh, I forget one more. Earlier than the Vinca and the Varna cultures. I found this out, shit, damn, about 2015, 2016. It's a book that I read. It's called Europe Before Rome. Also I don't know if that, I think that's a book that's in the reference section. Yes, it's like a textbook. And it just basically goes beyond Rome. It traces the European cultures going back as far as shit, fucking, oh my god, because I found about cultures in Cyprus. This is old as fucking what 11th 12th millennium BCs, literally. But anyway, I'm gonna keep all that to myself for now. So, in learning about all these different cultures, right? All these different signs of leading to culture, as well as earlier cultures people don't know about. I'm still thinking about the population numbers on the planet. If it was only like 112 million people in 480 BC, imagine how many people it was in 4500 BC on the entire planet. And to keep it more fair, because you get more prevalent cultures as time goes on, let's go to like the third millennium BC, still considering like Darnima, Dar and Dar Tagant in Mauritania, for example, because by that time, during the same millennium, that's when Dar Tachit was finally abandoned, sometime during the third millennium BC, right? I forget the exact date, but third millennium BC, take just consider the entire globe. That what just imagine like what exactly was the complete population number or the total population of the planet back then. Had to be much more lower than 112 million people. Now, consider all of those various societies back during that time, a little bit before that as well, that I named. So we can go back as far as the 6th millennium BC. Go from the 6th millennium BC up into the 3rd millennium BC. Think about all those prevalent or prominent, different groups, societies, populations, kingdoms, what have you, that I name. Imagine. Now, you see how far ahead that they were compared to the general population of the planet? Again, that makes me think deeply, even deeper, genetically and etc. Because I got a lot of personal theories, and everything I'm saying basically confirms all of it, especially like, for example, the malleability of intelligence. But again, if I speak on this shit, I ain't even stunned. This is just a thought documentation. If I chose to just keep going, this shit would turn out 3 hours at the least. I'm not lying. So I'm gonna keep it simple. So again, I was extremely appreciative when I came across the numerical estimation as far as in 480 BC of the planet possibly or probably being around 112 million people. So again, going even further back, think about how advanced these various peoples were. Again, I'm a descendant of Africa. So is the majority of African Americans here. As a child, it's a personal thing. I think Egyptian society is absolutely fascinating. So there's no diss or whatsoever. I just always wondered, like, this is like even when I was still living in Chicago before we moved to the suburbs. I always wondered. I used to be like, okay, we from West Africa. I mean, I want to know more than what they showing on television or on the movies. Like the roots and all that was cool, but as a little kid, I always thought about other societies. I'm like, and this is no John Henry. This is before I even heard about John Henry Clark or any of that. But anyway, I always wonder, like, I know it's got to be a lot more to the story than they're showing. Of course, other societies, they seem to have a more complex history and it's romantic. I don't even want to say romanticized, but it's presented the best way it can be presented, at the least, objectively. There's nothing really wrong with that. I don't really consider that an embellishment. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It just so again, like me doing my own research, I find out a lot more shit that just is fucking amazing. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of shit that I came across. That's why I always say it's many more wonders to the world than just seven wonders of the world. But anyway, as you can see, I go on and on for 3 hours. The main point is that population number. So it puts it in perspective for me going back, you know what I'm saying? Again, the fifth millennium BC, we can even go further than that. And as far as Ghana's Germany, you know, the earliest writing on a fucking planet that's documented. You know what I'm saying? I read that in the book of the Europe before Rome. 11,000 years ago, around 9,000 BC. It's clear. There's a vivid picture of it and everything. It's not too withered away to where, you know, there's possible room for a fucking argument or some type of contention. Like that could just be nature or something. You know, like the picture of the space helmet on the moon type shit. Nah, it's fucking clear. But it's also dated or approximated to be as old as 11,000 years ago. That's fucking interesting. Again, even think about what was the total population of the planet back then. And you compare that particular writing system, which of course continues to expand and grow just like arrows and bows. You know, I already documented that before, but like I said, I'll keep it simple. But still, going through all these various different centuries, consider the population number. And as old as about 32,000 years ago, getting more material, tangible traces of culture. That's when the earliest cave paintings started. Carvings of terracotta and figurines, little statues of people and exotic characters as well. You know what I'm saying? So realistic depictions as well as some exotic depictions. There's a wall engraving of a female, heavy set female. That's another thing I noticed. You know what I'm saying? Uh, with horns and things like that. When I read the book of Joshua years ago, and I kept thinking about these references to horns, I'm like, damn, like in Europe, going back during that time, and those were people of color too, but I don't want to get beside the point. Going back to Europe during that time, I'm like, what the fuck is so? It got to be some significance to these horns I'm steady seeing. This particular depiction of a female has that in there as well. You know what I mean? So there's other things too, like the weapons were not rudimentary, like different type of spears. Like, but anyway, I'm gonna keep it simple. So consider all that shit. Consider the population of the planet again. That confirms my theories. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I touch on so many things, boy. I go fucking nuts. So anyway, that's just a thought documentation, just things I'm considering the population of the planet, etc. You know what I mean? Different during different time periods. You know, again, ultimately inspired from that fucking particular date of 480 BC and what the total number was at that time. So yeah, that just sparks some shit in my mind, of course. So yeah, I just wanted to get that off, do this recording for that, and then continue processing for my next vlog, which is Old Testament prophecies of Jesus. All right, have a good one.